Hello and welcome to Blues Kind, the show for kind blues. Today I want to continue my list series focusing on our small forwards, but where I wanted to start things was with today's news, with the club coming out and backing Michael Voss to be our coach into 2026. I don't want to dwell too much on it, but what I wanted to say is just a couple of things that I think are positive out of the announcement. I think it brings clarity and unity. A lot of the rumblings out of the club at the minute are that there is a little bit of a disconnect, potentially in game plan, potentially within the list itself of people who rate Voss, rate the game plan, don't rate Voss, don't rate the game plan. So by the club coming out and taking this step, it makes a pretty unequivocal step forward as to which way the club wants to go on it. I'm hoping it quiets any dissenting voices that are inside the club. If they think that it's in fact the wrong decision, they are welcome to look elsewhere. That obviously hasn't played out yet, so we don't know who those parties might be, but, we'll find out in the coming weeks. I also hope it kind of quietens down some of the voices outside of the club, whether it be media, prominent ex-players, prominent supporters, whomever it is. The club has made its decision very clear, and personally, I'm wrapped with it. Even if Vossi doesn't work out next year, I think it's a tremendous sign that the club is going in a much more stable direction than maybe it has previously. Something that I really liked out of it was that they said that Voss comes to work every day hoping to make the Carlton Football Club a better place. And given some of his detractors, especially internally, are obviously not doing that by potting the club, leaking things to the media, I would much rather we go with the guy who's earnestly trying to make us better. So for mine, I'm wrapped. Good decision. But I want to move on to the list series, focusing today, as I mentioned, on small forwards. Now, my ultimate view, and I want to give you my conclusion up front, is that we are going to need to improve in the aggregate. I don't think, and I'll explain why shortly, there's going to be an option to change a hell of a lot on the list in terms of our small forwards in order to make it better. The way I assess this is based on their rankings in terms of per game stats for tackles inside 50 and pressure acts, as well as taking into account factors such as their age, matches played this year, number of goals. And you can see that in the statistics underneath my chin. So one thing that I'll tell you is that there doesn't seem to be a lot of room to cut players. My view is that we will need to get better by improving the game plan, allowing smalls not to need to defend the whole of ground. I know myself, I have memories of guys like Fogarty and Motlop doing chase down tackles in our back line. That puts tremendous stress on their ability to be able to excel as forwards. So I think with the recommitment to Michael Voss and the indication being that we're probably going to change the game plan around, I'm hoping that in the aggregate we will see some improvement. So I wanted to start with our contracted players, and they're the first 5 names that you can see listed in the table below. The one I wanted to start off with is Zach Williams. We can't move him no matter what. Zach has a contract for next year, and because it was signed through free agency, there's no room to tear it up or to move the money around. So while his pressure numbers have been low, he is the best in terms of goal output as well as assists, although it's not shown there. And I think he has shown that he's able to run through the midfield and provide some sort of versatility. So not only is he incredibly unlikely to be moved because of his contractual situation, he is probably our best performed small forward, which does say something. But with that said, you don't normally get better by getting rid of the best guy at a given position. Elijah, I sort of want to leave to the side, given he has mental health considerations. He's now back at the club, which is awesome, but I'm not really going to touch on him too much. Again, like I mentioned, these guys are contracted. Corey Durden is solid in terms of goals. He's actually one of the few players on our list that averages more than a goal a game. and also pressure inside 50. Not as good as around the ground, but personally, I would rather take a small forward that gets his goal a game and provides a couple of tackles inside 50. As we can see, he actually ranks third in our team amongst these players for tackles inside 50. So he is providing a serviceable role. Fogarty is really good in terms of pressure, but not goals. A big part of that for Fogarty is while he is, top 4 in our team for all of the pressure stats that I've presented below, he is kicking basically a goal every 2 games. A part of that is inaccuracy. I personally remember against North him missing 2, you'd probably call them sitters. So that is the sort of thing you would hope gets corrected, but it is the sort of thing that if he was out of contract, I would say it actually makes him quite vulnerable, despite his pressure being pretty good. And Moya, just re-signed for 2 more years, is young, and I think of all of the forwards in the list, shows the most upside in terms of skill with ball in hand, poise, ability to read the game at quite a good level. If you compare him to some others, and I don't want to name names on this one, he shows a propensity to be able to find guys in space and not blaze away that is not shared by everyone on our team. So he's only played the 6 games this year, going a goal a game, with his peak being against Melbourne where he kicked 4, showed a lot. Hopefully he can develop. So the uncontracted guys. I'm instantly drawn to Chincotta and Orazio because of their age. They're 29 and 30 respectively. Chink's stats are a little bit misleading because he plays mainly as a tagger, which I would assume elevates his pressure numbers. As you can see, top 2 for everything. He's, really solid. However, it does compromise his ability to kick goals, where he's kicked 1 goal from the games that he's played this year. Orazio, on the other hand, is much more dead down the middle, kicks his goal a game and is middle of the road in terms of pressure statistics. If it was up to me and you could only keep 1, I'd rather Orazio. Part of the reason for that is I don't really rate taggers all that highly. I particularly don't rate taggers that have to start as forwards because it takes something away from our forward mix, because instead of having an additional forward pocket or half forward, you've got someone who's now dedicating time to one of the opposition's midfielders. And I feel it unbalances the team a little bit. Orazio is also I think it's fair to say, a more skilled player. His accuracy at goal statistics is definitely better. He also provides more goal assists. So I would rather that in a depth piece, you had a guy that has, that greater propensity in terms of skill. Frankie Evans is a much maligned player. I think that some of his stats have been dragged down by the fact that he's been the sub a couple of times this year. However, he is otherwise reasonably middle of the road. He is, however, only 24. And when you compare him, say, to Corey Durden and Flynn Young, who are a year younger than him, I wouldn't say he's necessarily that far behind him. I would also say that when compared to those 2 players, his high points of the seasons, his first half against Melbourne and his game against Fremantle last week, are better than their high points. I'm not suggesting for a second that really anyone on this list, apart from Moya, could be a potential star, but in a sea full of average, Frankie doesn't stand out as particularly bad or particularly good. And that's a little bit of the problem of this batch. Flynn Young and Will White, I'll discuss together because they're both guys that we got through. One was through SSP and one was through the mid-season draft. So through sort of, unusual methods. They're both new to the club. They're 23 and 4 respectively. Their numbers are also not necessarily all that fantastic. What I would say is that Will White, he's up to 12 games now, 9 goals. So he's ticking towards being a goal a game player, which is nice. In addition, his pressure numbers aren't the greatest. He ranks at best 6th for any of the metrics that I've decided to rely on. However, one thing that I really like about Will White is I notice him. He has really good energy. I remember against Hawthorn, he had multiple holding the ball decisions, and again against Fremantle, I believe he had another one there where, if you have the ability to sort of burst from 0 to 60 in terms of your pace and run a guy down and flash across the screen, you can have an impact on the game even with limited numbers. So of the two of them, I probably prefer Will, but again, Flynn's played all of 5 games and I don't really want to stamp his cards. So that's a lot of words fairly to essentially say nothing. Putting the hand up, 10 minutes into the video, I haven't really said a lot. And it's for the reason that I've sort of indicated. In a sea of average, Moya looks like the absolute standout, and Zach Williams is probably our best performed. With all of that said, there's one other player that I want to touch on who I think is grossly misunderstood and as a result very maligned. I think people look at Jesse Motlop and see a guy who should be a number 1 small forward in terms of goals and output. A big issue that gets in Jesse's way is he's kicking a goal at just over 40% this year. But what he is actually really good at is pressure. He's the best pressure player in our team. He's also the 3rd best small forward in terms of tackles and 4th for tackles inside 50. He hasn't replicated his goal scoring since 2023, where I believe it was in 22 games, he scored 26 goals. And again, I think accuracy is actually probably the biggest part of that. But in terms of energy, in terms of versatility, and in terms of pressure, versatility because he's been able to go on the ball a little bit, I think that Jesse has still shown he has upside. He's still also only 22. I would think that of the players that are out of contract, he is the most deserving of getting re-signed for at least another 2 seasons. I think that he can fix his goal scoring issues, and then he has the potential to be a really nice pressure player who also chips in with a goal or 2 a game, which would be honestly outstanding. If you sign him for 2 years and by the end of that he's not really showing the improvement you'd like to see, well, that kind of gives you your answer. But I think at the age of 22, he's still worth persevering with. In terms of the other guys who are out of contract, I don't really want to say that any of them should necessarily be delisted. The 2 eldest guys are, a bit better in terms of output, but then the younger guys have more upside. It's a little bit of what direction does the club want to take in that regard. Ultimately, what I think we need to do is twofold. The first, like I mentioned before, is change the game plan to allow players to start in a more attacking mode and not need to defend the whole of ground. That will mean that 1, they're not buggered when they get back to goal, but 2, they get to be a little bit more dangerous, because it's really difficult when you get sucked all the way into your defensive 50, lay a tackle, and your man gets to sag off. So it's not just that they're closer to your goal than you are. It's also that now you have to get past them in order to get to dangerous space. So it's quite a big ask. In addition to that, the dream would be if we could snag a number 1 small from somewhere else. And it doesn't have to be, Jamie Elliott or Toby Green or, one of the superstars of the game. I think someone who's aging a little bit, who still has a few years left to go, like Liam Ryan, could be excellent. And it's not that we need to come in and see him kick 50 goals. If he can come in and kick 30 and take the best small defender, I think it would give opportunity to guys like Motlop to fall more correctly into where they should be in the pecking order. If Motlop was your 2nd best small forward or your 3rd best, he would be overqualified for the position, in my opinion. There are rumours we're looking at a guy like Beau McCreary from Collingwood. However, I don't think he'd fix our goal scoring woes. His best ever output was 17 goals in a season where he played 25 games. Although I do think he's a very good player. And if we got him, I think he would be a contributor, just not in the way that I think we need the most. The other one that I would have a really strong look at that you might be able to prize out is Ben Ainsworth at the Gold Coast Suns. He's sort of fallen down behind Long this season, Ben Long, who's kicked, I think, something like 30, 35 goals the last time I looked. He's had a really strong season, Ben Long. So someone like Ainsworth who could now potentially come in as a number one and has had previous years where he is that sort of over a goal a game player. He's had a couple of games where he's kicked these sort of bags of four and around that mark. I don't want to promise too much statistically if I haven't looked it up. And he's still a reasonably young player. I think he'd be about 24. I think that's the sort of guy that could potentially take the next step. But short of doing that, you're looking at names like Malcolm Roses Jr., who could be a nice player, but he's very unproven. He hasn't played a lot of football. So a lot of the names that the likes of John Ralph have sort of linked us to, a lot of them just haven't played a lot of football. So I don't think there's any reason to say definitively that those guys could potentially improve us. Therefore, I think playing faster and having cleaner ball movement up the ground could go a long way to helping these guys. Ultimately, coming out of this year, we have a few guys that could realistically be a goal a game forward. So, if they played 23 games, it would be around 23 goals. Obviously, some of the names I'm about to list are not going to get to that mark in terms of games. So Zach Williams, Corey Durden, Ashton Moyer, Jesse Motlop, and Will White. Being around that sort of goal a game is nice. It's not game-changing, but it does mean that we have sort of, a composition of players that could meaningfully contribute. The other big factor outside of a changing game plan and continued development from some of the younger guys like Motlop, like Moyer, like Will White, that I would hope to see is twofold. One is Harry and Charlie have had very down years this year. Between them, I don't think they've kicked 50 goals. Whereas